£2. Text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Well, coming up, Rishi Sunak signals his biggest hint yet. He's prepared to withdraw from the ECHR over the Rwanda plan. Is the foreign court just a big red herring? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Children's stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland now come with a trigger warning at universities, alerting readers to possible themes of white supremacy.
Yes, these warnings are being applied to colonial narratives. That's the claim, commonly found in adventure stories and famous novels from the Victorian era. Well, joining us now is the actor Charlie Lawson. And Charlie, these warnings have been applied to Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. What's this university getting at?
Well, look, first of all, this is nothing new. We hadn't heard about it for a while. Universities have been doing this over the last couple of years. I remember having a chat with one of your colleagues. But when Gabriella, the lovely Gabby, phoned me up today, I had to beg her to put me on after 9 o'clock because I found myself getting rather irate about the whole thing. But I will do my best to be very polite.
Yes, keep it clean.
Yes, look, which is quite difficult for me, as you'll appreciate, over this subject. Look, this is universities just jumping on the same trying to be relevant bandwagon. Is it any wonder that we look at the quality of graduates from university, and in my humble opinion, some of them are slightly disappointing. But I did phone a couple of people I knew who had sons and daughters at various leading universities, and they had been speaking this morning. And thank the Lord, they think it's a complete load of bloody nonsense, as I do. Give the C.S. Lewis Centre a ring in East Belfast, because that's where your man came from. And I think you'll find you'll get short shrift, because we're not all about that in East Belfast. We don't censor anything.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 3:27. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, the Tories are on course for a 1997-style electoral wipeout. Seat-by-seat analysis by YouGov suggests Labour would sweep to power with 403 seats, handing them a massive supermajority of 154, almost twice what Boris Johnson got. Now, good news for Keir Starmer, who's also marking 4 years today as Labour leader, and a remarkable turnaround of his party's fortunes. And all of this as the Prime Minister says Britain could, if, might, maybe pull out of the European Court of Human Rights. If, possibly, that it might do, it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Well, let's get now the thoughts of our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who joins me in studio. Catherine, welcome to the show. Let's start with this poll, shall we? Because polls are polls. But every single poll now seems to have the same direction of travel, the same momentum, word no unintended. It's looking very, very bleak for the Conservatives. This latest one signifying an even bigger loss than John Major faced when Blair kicked him out of Downing Street in '97.
Yes, that's right. There's been two catastrophic polls for the Conservative Party, frankly, just since Easter Sunday, when there was another of these MRP polls, both horrific reading if you are a Conservative MP. Not only Labour getting over 400 seats, but the Conservatives, according to this one, 19,000 people were polled, and these MRP polls, they're quite clever the way they do the calculations. The Conservatives potentially down to 155 seats. Worth saying the one on Easter Sunday was even worse. They were at 98 seats. And a lot of really big beasts potentially set to go, including Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, who might like to be leader, Penny Mordaunt, leader of the House of Commons, another real favourite for the leadership if, as expected, Rishi Sunak does lose the next election. A couple of other points. Both the Lib Dems and Reform are projected on this poll to get 12% each, but in a sign of the way this first past the post works, that means that the Lib Dems projected to get 49 seats and Reform Party on the same vote share, not a single one. Indeed, Lee Anderson, who recently defected from the Conservatives, that seat, Ashfield, is projected to go back to the Labour Party.
And what's astonishing about this is that 75% of everybody in the Commons would be a Labour Party member of Parliament. It's absolutely mind-boggling. If you think about the majorities in the past, the swings in the past, we've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, and it's not good for democracy, is it? This is something that Sir Geoffrey Cox was talking about to our political editor, Chris Hope, a couple of weeks ago, because governments with big majorities, the bigger the majority, the more likely it is that they will come up with some bad ideas and be able to railroad them through. You do need that scrutiny, that kickback from the opposition. So huge majorities, not great for democracy. But I mean, OK, it hasn't happened yet. Things can always change. We're expecting the election probably in November after the American election. But what a turnaround, because in 2019, Boris Johnson got 80 seats. Labour was decimated. They had their worst results since 1935, and Sir Keir Starmer came in. People sort of thought he'd be like a caretaker, that it would take 10 years to rebuild the Labour Party. But a combination largely of chaos within the Conservative Party and the fact that Keir Starmer has managed to sort of detoxify Labour and also make it not scary, because under Jeremy Corbyn, quite a lot of voters were really quite frightened at the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, whereas a lot of people don't feel scared. They might not be happy about the idea of Keir Starmer as PM, but they're not scared by it in the same way.
Catherine Forster, it really makes you think that people will look back, historians, on this as an astonishing period in British political history, an unprecedented period, an 80-seat majority becoming 165 seats majority the other way. Absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio, Catherine Forster. Now, of course, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock as we have the latest on the police investigating the care of the dead at East Yorkshire funeral homes. But before that, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. The headlines from the newsroom at just after 3:30. The mastermind of an armed robbery 19 years ago that ended in a police officer being shot dead has been found guilty today of her murder. PC Sharon Beshenivsky was killed by Pirandita Khan in 2005. The 38-year-old officer died after interrupting a raid at a family-run travel agent's in Bradford. She had only been a police officer for 9 months at the time. Khan flew to Pakistan 2 months after the murder and remained at large until he was arrested in 2020. He's the last of 7 men who were involved in that robbery to now be convicted. He was found guilty at Leeds Crown Court today and will be sentenced at a later date. The Prime Minister says that Britain could pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights if it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak says that controlling illegal migration is more important than membership of the ECHR, and that he would not let what he called the foreign court interfere in sovereign matters. British farmers are calling for a guaranteed basic income after post-Brexit arrangements left many worse off. At least 100 have joined a campaign group urging the government to help cover basic costs after the loss of subsidies from the European Union. It comes as suppliers warn of higher prices and empty supermarket shelves due to a new post-Brexit border charge, which will be introduced at the end of this month. And while some parts of the UK could see temperatures as high as 20 degrees this weekend, warmer than cities like Madrid and Barcelona, parts of Scotland are set for snow. Weather warnings have been issued for snowfall, for wind and for rain as Storm Kathleen rolls in, the 11th named storm in just 8 months. Gusts of up to 70 miles an hour are expected along the west coast of England, with 50-mile-an-hour winds also expected in other areas. The Met Office is urging people to take care, as coastal areas could also see large waves. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. To keep across the day's other stories, you can scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Next, a look at the markets.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2678 and €1.1660. The price of gold is currently £1,810 and 9 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,979 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Now, coming up, does chanting on the terraces count as a threat to free speech? Well, several footy fans are finding that's what's been said, and the game is now carrying a hefty fan. In fact, a Wrexham fan banned for 3 years for some abuse, which, frankly, I think is just a part of life on the terraces. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The southbound M73, this is southeast of Glasgow. The exit slip that takes you onto the northbound M74 closed off. It's all due to an overturned lorry. It's causing queues. On the northbound M1, Luton North 11A up to Flitwick at 12. No lane shut for emergency road repairs and delays on the cameras. It's still very slow anti-clock on the M25, though it's back open. Godstone at 6 towards Junction 5. Following investigation work surrounding routes queuing, not least back towards Junction 7 at the M23 and the A25 past Oxted. On the clockwise M25, 2 lanes are currently blocked. There's a broken down vehicle. That's from the M23 at 7 to Reigate at Junction 8. There's a 2-mile queue there on the approaches this afternoon as well. And for now, that's your very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate.
So is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're 4th in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. You know, we talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
Welcome back. The time is 3:38. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, the Prime Minister has hinted at ripping up the UK's international obligations to get Rwanda flights off the ground and stop the boat. Speaking to the Sun newspaper, Sunak said controlling illegal migration is more important than a membership of any foreign court, but he did sidestep a question on whether he would pledge to leave the ECHR in the Conservatives' election manifesto. Well, joining me now to speak more on this is the ECHR of that topic, is the international human rights lawyer David Hay. Great fan of you, David, and you know certainly a load about this. David, we've had this conversation, it seems, endlessly. Groundhog Day, it feels like Rishi Sunak rattling his sabre. The big question is, David, do you think the Prime Minister even has the political appetite to do this?
Good afternoon, Martin. I think you've got an increasingly desperate Rishi Sunak here, and if he genuinely thinks that he will be the Prime Minister and take us out of the ECHR, he's not just desperate; he's delusional. Even if you look at the process to come out of the ECHR in terms of time left, there isn't that. We don't have that time. We need, for example, one of the ways is a 6 months notice period. Even if we gave that now, there's going to be an election probably before that. And there's certainly no ability for him to do that in his party at the moment. So again, it's not delusion, it's purely trying to get votes. And as a human rights lawyer, I'm not worried that he will be bringing us out of the ECHR anytime soon.
OK, and David, I just want to read out a comment from a viewer which sums it up, and it will segue into a question for you to answer. Sue says this: other countries in Europe, for example, Italy and France, well, they don't take any notice of the ECHR if they decide to expel asylum seekers. Why should we? And David, doesn't that cut to the nub of this? The political will to defy the ECHR, to defy Strasbourg, if you like, is already there. We don't need to leave the ECHR. We just don't need to have the guts to stand up to them.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Now, I obviously, as a human rights lawyer, don't want to leave the ECHR, but we have in the past ignored rulings, and we can do that in the future. Now, it's not obviously a thing that, as a lawyer, you want to suggest that people ignore laws and break them. That's not something that should be doing. But you're quite right. I think there should be, if Sunak had a strong party, and it's more of a political point really than a legal one, he can do that. Other European countries are all done it in the past, but I think that would fracture an already very fractured Conservative Party. And this, I think, is nothing more than a vote play. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not possible to leave the ECHR before the next general election, just in terms of existing laws.
So David, just to clarify, it is great. So there isn't time to do it anyway. We don't actually need to do it anyway. And so what is all of this? Do you think it's just electioneering, it's posturing, it's tough talking of somebody who seems to be running out of ideas?
Absolutely. I've said it months ago. He's creating the monster under the bed to scare people, I think, to weaponise the bogeyman of the ECHR. Kind of for want of a better description, a kind of a Poundland version of Boris's Get Brexit Done. He's desperate for anything that will give people a reason to vote for Sunak and not vote for Starmer. And I think this is just hopeless.
And David, another point, if it were to proceed towards some sort of withdrawal from the ECHR, a referendum, whatever that may be, you'd expect the legal institution, the judges, the judiciary, the courts, the barristers, the charities, the entire machine, as we saw with Brexit, would surely launch into overdrive to stop this thing even happening anyway.
Absolutely, and if they use the process that's there by giving 6 months' notice, that's a quagmire of chaos, effectively, because then what that doesn't stop previous things that breached the ECHR when we were a member from suddenly being able. So they'd have to re-legislate things. So it's just more and more mess, more and more chaos, and it just won't happen. And the Prime Minister must know that.
OK, so David, I want to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it is that we're ever going to leave the ECHR anytime soon?
0. Anytime soon. I don't see it happening. I don't see the Conservative Party getting back in with a sufficient majority, if they get a majority or someone does, to bring us out. And even if they did, it's going to take a long time. There'll be, aside from the actual legislation point of that, there will be legal battles. And even if that did happen, it doesn't immediately solve the problem that we've got of people coming across the channel. So that none of those things are workable. And it's, rather than waste time and money on that, let's actually look at things like processing and do things that could affect and have a positive impact on the problem we've got with illegal migration, rather than doing essentially this to win votes.
And David, finally, if the Labour Party were to get into power and all the polls are suggesting a bigger landslide, we don't need to redefine the word landslide by the looks of it, bigger than 1997, the Labour Party will have absolutely no appetite whatsoever, will they, to take us out of the ECHR? So this moment will be completely past.
Absolutely, and if polls are to be believed, and that's a big if, then you're going to have a Labour government, perhaps, with a very strong majority for a long time, and it's not on their radar to bring us out of the ECHR. Now, it's a human rights lawyer, and I've said before, I do think we need to start looking at reforming certain definitions of human rights. But again, I don't see that's something that the Labour Party will be doing either.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. That's human rights lawyer David Hay. Always an absolute pleasure to have you on Straight Talking. Great stuff. Now, we heard around about an hour ago from the police about the investigation into legacy funeral directors. And last month, police arrested 2 people and removed 35 bodies over concerns about the storage and the management processes in the Hull-based funeral director, meaning some bodies may have been mixed up. And the police said today that they were unable to identify the ashes due to DNA degradation. An astonishing story. And now let's bring in our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Anna Riley. Anna, welcome to the show. An astonishing, a grotesque story that's captivated the nation. What's the latest?
Good afternoon, Martin. Yes, well, Humberside Police held a press conference here in Hull this afternoon in connection with their investigation into legacy funeral directors that has 2 branches in Hull and 1 in Beverley. And as part of that update that they gave the press, they said that individuals cannot be identified from ashes recovered from the funeral directors, and that they'd been in contact with over 700 families to offer their support. The Police Chief Constable Tom McLaughlin said the high temperatures required for cremations meant that no meaningful DNA could be recovered. He added that it would be devastating news for families and offered his condolences. As you say, this update comes 1 month after the investigations first started. A quantity of ashes were removed from the funeral directors on Hessel Road, and 35 bodies as well. It involved over 100 police officers from Humberside Police, and it also involved the National Crime Agency as well. Understandably, like you say, it's something that's captivated the nation, really, not just people here in Hull and East Yorkshire who have been shocked and upset. There's been scant information so far before this that has been released by the police. They've asked people not to speculate. We know that 2 people are out on bail at the moment. A 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman were arrested in connection with this, and Humberside Police have previously described the investigation as highly complex. In the press conference this afternoon, the council also spoke as well. They said that it had visited funeral directors across East Yorkshire, and that it was clear from these visits that the incident being investigated with legacy funeral directors was isolated and in no way reflective of the wider funeral funeral industry. Police also said that they've still got a dedicated hotline set up for grieving families to contact them, and that they've had over 2,000 calls so far. And there's been contacts as well from families to the press, some people saying that they didn't know whether it was their loved one in the coffin at the funeral that they kissed. They didn't know if there was a body in the coffin. Another man saying that he didn't know whether it was in fact his wife's ashes that had been given to him. And of course, from what police have said today, they've said due to the changes that happened during cremation that no meaningful DNA can be recovered. So outpouring of support to families locally as well, with that hotline still being open. And the local MP as well, Emma Hardy, also said affected families would not have to pay for another funeral, with the cost being picked up by the local authority.
Hey, thank you, Anna Riley, outside in Hull. The story of legacy independent funeral directors, an astonishing story. Thank you for that update. Now, coming up, as a Wrexham football fan is handed a 3-year ban for shouting anti-English abuse, which, if you ask me, was perfectly acceptable, is policing at matches now becoming yet another woke joke. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again and welcome to the GB News forecast with the Met Office. Further rain arrives overnight. It's going to stay cold in the north, and as the rain moves into Scotland, there will be some disruptive snow over the hills north of the Central Belt. A number of systems coming our way over the next few days. The next low brings spells of rain and hill snow across the UK, and then another low for the weekend. Storm Kathleen, named by Met Erin because the strongest winds will be for the Republic of Ireland. But it will be blustery overnight nevertheless, with some heavy rain in places. Those spells of rain particularly affecting northern and western parts of the country, although the far north of Scotland staying clear of that, with a touch of frost in places. But it's across central Scotland where there's the risk of disruption as we start off Friday. Rain disruption for lower parts of the Central Belt, and for higher parts of the Central Belt and into central Scotland, the risk of some disruptive snow up to 10 centimetres or so above 300 metres. Could cause some issues first thing. That peters out through the day and it stays cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's a mild day. Early rain clears to showers, some sunny spells in between the downpours, with highs of 18 or even 19 Celsius towards the southeast. Another blustery day on Saturday. In fact, it becomes increasingly windy as heavy rain moves north across Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing, replaced by showers. Some sunshine in between the showers. The wind will be strong with gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour for Western Britain and Northern Ireland, but it will also be a warm wind, highs of 20 or 21 Celsius.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's just coming to 3:52. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a Wrexham football fan has been banned from attending football matches for 3 years after directing a racial slur at Tranmere Rover supporters, and the insults were picked up by body cameras worn by the Old Bill at the match in a game which was deemed high risk, as back in 2006, over 30 supporters were arrested between the two sides. So I'm asking this question: is hooliganism culture back on the rise, or is this woke policing of the terraces getting out of hand? To discuss this, I'm joined now by the sports broadcaster Chris Scudder. Scudders, welcome to the show. Listen, the terraces can be fruity places, as well you know. These lads were arrested for something that I hear probably 1,000 times a match whenever I go. Is this legitimate policing, or is it just wokery gone too far?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's racist. I mean, you hear anti-nationalistic stuff. I mean, English, Welsh, Scottish, every time the teams from different countries play, it happens all the time. Football fans would tell you it's good-natured banter, good-humoured banter. But, the police don't agree. I mean, the policing of football has got very, very, very strict over the last 20 years or so. Remember the days in the Thatcher years in the 80s when it was just the Wild West. Doesn't happen anymore since legislation changed. The use of cameras came in. You mentioned their body cams, and it's the biggest weapon. Those who are into the football scene and have been involved in hooliganism know that they can't get away with it anymore. But this is another level altogether. The use of language now. Banter. 3-year banning order, which is pretty severe, plus a fine as well. It's happening in many different contexts. Newcastle fan got a 3-year ban for what they considered offensive language over the Munich air disaster. That's fair enough, I think. A Liverpool fan got banned for homophobic slurs against Chelsea fans. That's fine, I think, as well. But I think this is, calling somebody an English B or a Welsh C, or that's the context here. I think it's getting pretty extreme, and some would say, 1-0 to the wokerati. The police would say, I think, it's about context here. And when somebody approaches a group of fans, if it's in an aggressive manner, they're going to get nicked. If it's just a chant, a friend of mine online today went to the Newport-Stockport game and said something about the fans were saying Welsh sheep shearing, the rest of that. And it happens all the time.
OK, Scudders, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I totally agree with you. Coming up, more on that soft sentencing. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. First, it's time for your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the GB News forecast with the Met Office. Further rain arrives overnight. It's going to stay cold in the north, and as the rain moves into Scotland, there will be some disruptive snow over the hills north of the Central Belt. A number of systems coming our way over the next few days. The next low brings spells of rain and hill snow across the UK, and then another low for the weekend. Storm Kathleen, named by Met Erin, because the strongest winds will be for the Republic of Ireland. But it will be blustery overnight, nevertheless, with some heavy rain in places. Those spells of rain particularly affecting northern and western parts of the country, although the far north of Scotland staying clear of that, with a touch of frost in places. But it's across central Scotland where there's the risk of disruption as we start off Friday. Rain disruption for lower parts of the Central Belt, and for higher parts of the Central Belt and into central Scotland, the risk of some disruptive snow up to 10 centimetres or so above 300 metres. Could cause some issues first thing. That peters out through the day and it stays cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's a mild day. Early rain clears to showers, some sunny spells in between the downpours, with highs of 18 or even 19 Celsius towards the southeast. Another blustery day on Saturday. In fact, it becomes increasingly windy as heavy rain moves north across Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing, replaced by showers. Some sunshine in between the showers. The wind will be strong with gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour for Western Britain and Northern Ireland, but it will also be a warm wind, highs of 20 or 21 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News. the latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Southbound M73, the exit slip to join the M74 northbound still closed off, and overturned lorry still causing queues. Emergency road repairs causing delays northbound for the M1. There's a lane shut Luton North 11A up towards Flitwick at junction 12. Long queues anti-clock for the M25 away from Godstone at 6 following an earlier bump there, but the bigger queues are on the A25, very slow through Oxted and Westerham. The Dartford Tunnel anti-clock queues towards it following an earlier collision as well. The queue there is back towards Swanley at the M20 turn-off, and the clockwise M25 just before St Albans 22, 3-lane shut, queuing back to the M1 at junction 21, and that's due to a multi-vehicle collision this afternoon. And for now, that's your very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Coming up on today's show, is it time for more lenient sentences? Well, judges are being told to consider softer punishments for those who are from disadvantaged backgrounds. Well, has two-tier policing become a two-tier judiciary and creating a thugs charter? Next up, electric car downturn as sales of electric vehicles slump. Is the government's rush to net zero coming at the cost of British infrastructure, or do motorists simply not want electric cars? After that, Labour supermajority surge because a poll reveals 11 Tory cabinet ministers could be wiped out at the next general election, and Starmer's party will win 400 seats. Is the Labour Party now simply unstoppable as the Tories head for a 97-style tsunami? And as a Wrexham football fan is handed a 3-year banning order for shouting abuse at English fans, which, if you ask me, was perfectly acceptable. Is the desire to crack down on hooliganism now a threat to free speech, or are terraces becoming another woke joke? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. We've had over 1,000 comments now and emails on the topic of, does Rishi Sunak mean it when he says that the UK might leave the European Court of Human Rights? He said that yesterday. That could possibly be an option if the flights to Rwanda are grounded, which looks inevitable. But do you believe him? Is this bluster? Will it ever turn into action? Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com. And on a lighter point, are the terracers now becoming policed to the point of there's absolutely no joy left in them? Old Bill in body cam nicking people for misdemeanors, which I think are perfectly acceptable at the football. Is it OK to be slightly un-PC, unreconstructed on the terracers, or should we face the same standards at the football as we face in the office? Let me know. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. Before all of that, it's time for your headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom today is that the mastermind of an armed robbery in Yorkshire almost 20 years ago that ended in a police officer being shot dead has been found guilty of her murder. PC Sharon Beshanivsky was killed by Piran Dita Khan in 2005. The 38-year-old died after she interrupted a raid at a family-run travel agency in Bradford. She'd only been a police officer for 9 months. Khan flew to Pakistan immediately after the murder and remained at large until he was arrested in 2020. He's the last of the 7 men involved in the robbery to be convicted. He was found guilty at Leeds Crown Court and will be sentenced at a later date. The Prime Minister says Britain could pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights if it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak says controlling illegal migration is more important than membership of the ECHR, and he wouldn't let a foreign court interfere in sovereign matters. More than 600 British legal experts, including 3 former Supreme Court judges, are calling on the UK to stop selling arms to Israel. They say there's a plausible risk the weapons may be used to commit serious violations of international law and that the Prime Minister must change Britain's policy. British farmers are meanwhile calling for a guaranteed basic income after post-Brexit arrangements left many worse off. At least 100 have joined a campaign group urging the government to help cover basic costs after the loss of subsidies from the European Union. Analysis last year by the organic farming group Riverford found that half of Britain's fruit and vegetable growers may go out of business within a year. It comes as suppliers warn of higher prices and empty supermarket shelves due to a new post-Brexit border charge, which will be introduced at the end of the month. Judges have been told to consider more lenient sentences for offenders from deprived or difficult backgrounds. The Sentencing Council, which sets guidelines for judges and magistrates, has for the first time outlined mitigating factors that it says courts should consider before handing down a sentence. They include poverty, low education, discrimination and insecure housing. But critics say the law should treat everyone equally, with the Justice Secretary Alice Chalk describing the guidelines as both patronising and inaccurate. Leicester City Council says sensitive information has been posted online by a known ransomware group after it was stolen in a cyber attack. The local authority was the victim of a hack last month, forcing it to shut down its IT systems. It has confirmed now that confidential documents have been published by that group of hackers, including rent statements and some personal details. The group is known to have attacked a number of other government, education and healthcare institutions. The National Cyber Security Centre is now involved in an ongoing criminal investigation. And weather news, strong winds and heavy rain are due to hit parts of Britain this weekend as Storm Kathleen rolls in. That's the 11th named storm in just 8 months. We're expecting gusts of up to 70 miles an hour on Saturday along the west coast of England, with 50-mile-an-hour winds expected in other areas. The Met Office is urging people to take care. Coastal areas can also expect large waves. And there could be confusion for holidaymakers this summer going through security checks before catching flights. Several UK airports will miss a June deadline to introduce new high-tech 3D scanners designed to end the need to remove things like laptops and liquids from hand luggage. The government's granted a 12-month extension to some airports which haven't been able to install the new scanners due to problems including the weight of the machines themselves. It means some airports will continue restricting liquids to 100 millilitre bottles, despite the new rules, which were supposed to allow up to 2 litres. And the world's oldest man has died just 2 months before he would have celebrated his 115th birthday. Juan Vicente Perez was born in Venezuela in 1909, nearly 20 years before the first radio station even started broadcasting there. There were 6 British monarchs during his long lifetime and 20 US presidents. His death was announced by the governor of the region where he'd lived, who also described him as a humble, hard-working and peaceful man. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, judges have been told to consider more lenient sentences for offenders from deprived or difficult backgrounds. And this comes from the Sentencing Council, who are responsible for advising judges and magistrates across the land. And the guidelines on difficult and or deprived backgrounds state that these factors could include poverty, low educational attainment, experience of discrimination, and even insecure housing. But are these valid reasons to get away with crimes, or are we creating a whole can of worms? Well, let's discuss this now in the studio, where I'm joined by GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope, and I'm also joined by Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List. Good to have you back. It's been way too long. Let's start with you, Chris. This, to me, seems to defy the very point of everybody being equal before the law. Why, oh why, are they introducing this, and where could it possibly go wrong?
Why is a good question. Now, the jails are full, 98% capacity in England and Wales. We've got a sentencing bill sitting in Downing Street. They've got 40-odd Tory MPs led by Suella Braverman trying to make clear that if you want to bring in new sentencing measures, you can't not jail someone for less than a year, as the government's saying. Back in the King's speech, the government said they want to grasp the nettle, and they think soft sentencing, or they think, short-term sentencing doesn't work, so jail the most serious offenders. This is from the Sentencing Council, came into force on Monday. The government's not happy. Alex Chalk, the Lord Chancellor, and the Justice Secretary, saying this isn't right. What they've been told to do is consider lenient sentences for offenders from deprived or difficult backgrounds. So therefore, you have mitigating factors now for the first time. Personal backgrounds include poverty, low educational attainment, experience of discrimination and insecure hours. They can look at that and go, well, that person there has had a tough life, or they have had a tough life. Let's allow them, therefore, not to get maybe a tougher jail term because it's not really their fault. And that's an attempt, I think, to deal with what is a bigger problem, which is lack of jail space. OK, Peter Edwards, what's your take on this?
I do want a humane, liberal justice system, but I'm sceptical about this change. And one thing that goes above party politics is that we're all equal before the law, as you said in your intro. But the other point is, and Chris laid out the politics of it, is crime disproportionately affects poor communities. Yes. And I've been a volunteer and on boards of lots of poverty alleviation organisations. So if you're a mum on a council estate being terrorised by antisocial behaviour, you're not up there pleading the judge to give the people making your life a misery a softer sentence. You deserve justice and you deserve safety for your house and your kids. And I do worry particularly about, the law of good intentions taking you into a bit of an absurdity.
I think you're absolutely bang on. And it was so fascinating earlier on. We spoke to James Treadwell, who's a professor of criminology. He made a point which I thought was so good. He said this is giving the government a get out of jail card, because the jails are full and this makes them look like they're being caring and sharing. But really, they just can't shoehorn all the criminals in the land into the nicks. And so therefore, they're redefining what gets you in there in the first place. Surely that's shattering the concept of equality before the law.
Well, we're certainly in danger of mixing our metaphors. And as Chris said, it's down to politicians and the Home Office and the government to deal with the political element. So have we got enough prisons? If we're building more, who's paying for them? Should we change the law to make sence? Is tougher or weaker, for example? But judges have to set all that aside. And the judge's role to look at everything literally on a case-by-case basis and apply the law to it. And I think judges should focus less, and I think they probably are, but focus less on the numbers, because that should be really the Home Office and Justice Department to build enough prisons.
Now, politically, Chris, this has divided the Conservative Party. It's gone down like a cup of cold sick with the blue-collar Conservatives, those that are traditionally tough on law and order. They're on the battle path about it. So what's the point even introducing it in the first place?
That group founded there by Esther McVeigh, the MP for Tatton, now, of course, in the Cabinet Office as the so-called Common Sense Minister. They call it extremely patronising. I think the Tories are, they are lucky here. They find themselves on the right side. They're saying we should be jailing more offenders. We shouldn't let people off for their backgrounds without providing the endpoint, the space to put them in jail. So judges probably are being a bit more pragmatic, saying, well, you may say that's your position to say that, you're in politics, but I'm trying to get people off the streets who should be off the streets, and if you can find a reason not to jail them, here's one.
And it certainly feels to me that the real winners will be the lawyers, who will just be looking for any oppression or victimhood of anybody in the past to try and prove a case to wriggle off the hook, which I think is the opposite of fair law and order. Can we move on to some of recent polling, Peter? Looking very rosy for the Labour rosette, whereas, as it were, poll out today, 18,000 odd people polled, looking like there could be an even bigger wipeout of the Conservative Party now than we saw in 1997. And that would result in 75% of all parliamentarians being from the Labour Party. Do you think that will happen?
No. I'll be out there fighting for a Labour victory, as an activist, as I have been in every election pretty much in recent years. But we know a couple of things. First of all, we know that in recent years, Labour's lost and lost and lost again, sadly, and polls have often been overstated. Remember, Ed Miliband had a lead of up to 10 points, and then the party went backwards in terms of the number of MPs it had in 2015. Secondly, in what's called the short campaign, that busy 6-week period where it's wall-to-wall politics and we're all out there stuffing leaflets through letterboxes, the polls tend to narrow in favour of the government because voters, understandably, are risk-averse, and the government can do stuff now in the few months before an election, whereas the opposition can only talk about doing stuff in future, so the polls will narrow.
That's you being very pragmatic, but in actuality, one thing I'm really struck by this time, Chris, in stark contrast to 2019, where Conservative voters were saying we can't have a Labour government, anybody but Corbyn, ABC. Now, if you look below the line on The Telegraph, on The Express, even GB News viewers, they're saying the Tories deserve to get a kick.
They've just given away.
Things feel very different.
They've given away this landslide they won in 2019 for what, really? I mean, we're forecasting a 3-term Johnson premiership. The era of Johnson, the Johnson supremacy. That hasn't happened. This MRP polling out today, Labour win 403 seats, 154-seat majority. They need to win 120 to get to overturn what the Tories offered. It's extraordinary. Jeremy Hunt goes, Penny Mordaunt, Ian Duncan-Smith, Jacob Rees-Mogg, a colleague from GB News, he loses his seat according to this. The big hope number 10 have got is these don't knows. If they come out and they voted Tory last time, they give the Tories one more chance, a 5th term in office, and we'll wait and see that. I mean, it really is Labour's to lose, do you think, Peter?
It's certainly Labour's to lose, but the reason why I'm being cautious is not just recent history, that we know Labour's historically had some weaknesses, at least in terms of public perception, around the economy, social security, the deficit, which has kind of become an issue again, and immigration. And I think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have moved the party forward enormously on all those topics, but everything kind of Chris laid out probably tees up the government for perhaps quite a negative batten down the hatches campaign. It might not be much more than a few dog whistles on immigration and points along the lines of the economy's recovering, don't let Labour wreck it. I'm not sure the economy is recovering for most people.
Do you think, Chris?
Well, I was going to say, Peter, we're yet to see, are we, how your party will replace this non-dom tax they've lost to the Tory party. Where will they find the money, do you think, to pay for the extra investment in NHS?
Well, Rachel Reeves will come out and say that the process that is going on, and I did this in the Ed Miliband era, is you have a small number of staff, and it's your job to go through the books, and you literally have to read the reports of every government department. There's about 23 with billions of expenditure, and you go through line by line. So in the Ed Miliband, Ed Balls era, I was involved in that, and it's called the zero-based review. It's not exciting at all, but that's where you do the hard, detailed work of looking for savings. The other point is, well, we all want to grow the economy, but as Liz Truss showed, you need a plan more than just a mantra.
Peter, did you have anything to do with the Ed Stone?
No, I didn't. That was above my pay grade. And I actually thought Ed Miliband would have been a great Prime Minister because he's serious about policy and he's humane and he's super clever. And despite what a lot of papers said, he's patriotic. But I was in head office on the day the Ed Stone was unveiled, which was a weekend, and that will live in my memory forever.
We should say what the Ed Stone was, shouldn't we? It was a series of Labour pledges on an enormous, well, like a gravestone, really, wasn't it? It was a big...
Quite prophetic.
Quite prophetic, possibly. Well, Labour, no one forecast a Tory win at that point. And then what happened to it, Peter? Is it under a car park somewhere? Is it on your drive in the gravel? What happened to Ed Stone?
No, I mean, I think I have to probably do a hat tip to Guido Fawkes. I heard that it's been dismantled and is in a kind of secure storage unit somewhere well outside London, and I suspect it will never be seen again.
A bit like the Roswell incident.
Yes, exactly. Locked away, radioactive, at least politically.
Great. So thank you so much for joining us, Peter Edwards. No, it's great to have you back. Please become a regular in the studio. Great to see you. And, of course, Christopher Hope, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Now, I'll have lots more on that story, of course, at 5 o'clock. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. And you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much. Now, you may have a holiday booked for this year, but what about next year, 2025? Well, you could win a bespoke Greek cruise for two and our brand new giveaway. Not only that, but 10 grand in cold, hard, tax-free cash and a luxury travel gift package on top of that too. It's our biggest giveaway so far, and here's how you could trouser it.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, coming up, as poll after poll seems to show that Keir Starmer's dominating, are we heading for a 1997-style wipeout for the Tories? We might need to redefine the word landslide at this rate. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
The big thing here, Tom, is it actually even credible or possible that by 2030 we're going to have carbon
If we wanted to do it, is it an engineering possibility? Yes. Could we do it if we wanted to? Yes, we could. But so far, we're not on course to doing it. This government has not done a particularly good job of doing what we could do if we set our mind to it. The question remains to be seen whether a Labour government would do better.
You see, I wonder whether the only way you could even get anywhere near this is just to import more energy. And when we import stuff, we say, there's no carbon dioxide emissions. So really, I just wonder, and it's a bit like steel making and many other arguments, aren't we just conning ourselves?
Well, I don't think we're conning ourselves. I think we're not putting in the effort we need to get to where we say we want to get to. And, you know, we can do this stupidly or we can do it smartly. And you and I have talked before about, well, if you build nuclear power stations, that's not a very smart way to do it. If you insulate...
you say that. Yeah, go on.
Well, you didn't disagree with me, as I recall.
My worry was...
Maybe changing your mind. You're allowed to do that.
Look, nuclear's fine, but we ain't going to have it by 2030.
No, that's absolutely true. We certainly can agree about that. The key, real thing is, what can you do fastest and quickest that will drive people's bills down soonest? And that, for an incoming Labour government, driving bills down and incomes up will be their core priorities. So what can you do? Well, the first thing you need to do is make every single building in this country leak tight, because we've got the... Sorry?
New build.
No, every single building. New buildings, all the buildings we've got, they should be critical national infrastructure. They're the leakiest buildings in Europe. That really reduces our competitiveness. I'm talking about not just homes, I'm also talking about all of our small and medium-sized enterprises where growth is going to come from.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:23 now. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, today is the 4th anniversary of Sir Keir Starmer becoming the leader of the Labour Party in what could be a significant general election year for the Labour Party, of course. Now, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, takes a look back.
A changed Labour Party on the march, on your side, return to the service of working people.
Things can always change, and fast. But current polling predicts a huge Labour majority. How times change. 4 years ago, Starmer took over a Labour Party smarting from its worst defeat since 1935.
Cumulatively, we lost the trust of the public in the Labour Party as a force for good and a force for change. And we've lost 4 general elections.
Despite calls for a first female leader, the party plumped for another man from North London. On a platform of 10 left-wing pledges, making, he said, the moral case for socialism. Few of those pledges remain intact, but Baroness Jenny Chapman, who was Starmer's political secretary, explains.
So things that he said 4 years ago, before we'd left the European Union, before COVID, before the financial crisis that Liz Truss plunged us into as a country, before our mortgages all went through the roof, things you could say then, you know, it's just not pragmatic or realistic to say the exact same things now.
Starmer's determination to root out the anti-Semitism that had surged under Corbyn led to a zero-tolerance approach and quickly high-profile figures being sacked or losing the whip, including the former leader himself. Changing the party hasn't been easy. When Labour lost the Hartlepool by-election to the Tories in May 2021, Starmer came close to resigning. The ensuing reshuffle aimed to clip the wings of Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, but ended with her gaining a whole host of titles. But weeks later, the Partygate scandal began to break, and Labour passed the Tories in the polls.
Boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
As the Conservatives have swapped one Prime Minister for another and another, against a backdrop of high taxes and stretched public services, the Labour lead has only grown. Here's Scarlett Maguire, pollster at JL Partners.
And one thing that Keir Starmer has managed to do is make himself and the party look like a safe option again, especially around issues like immigration and the economy.
And his numerous U-turns on policy have been seized on by the Tories.
Now he seems to be opposing that policy. It's only Wednesday. I know he flip-flops, but even for him it's pretty quick.
The war in Gaza has led to rebellions and the humiliation of George Galloway winning Rochdale. But Starmer is focused on acting like a Prime Minister in waiting.
We actually recently asked voters to describe Keir Starmer in a single word, and the most commonly used words were weak, boring, unsure. People also use words like honest and competent and leader. And I think one thing that we hear more and more from people is that actually the more they see of him, at least they think he might be a little bit more normal than Rishi Sunak. Something we hear a lot. We hear we don't know what Keir Starmer stands for. We're not sure what the Labour Party stands for, but they must be better than what we've just had for the last 14 years, so we're going to give them a go.
In just 4 years, Sir Keir Starmer has dragged the Labour Party back towards the centre and to the edge of power. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, all of this comes as the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says Britain could pull out of the European Court of Human Rights if it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Well, joining me now to discuss this on the ECHR is the barrister and the writer and the friend of the show, Stephen Barrett. Stephen, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Do you think Rishi Sunak has any appetite whatsoever to leave the ECHR? I put this out to GBNews viewers earlier. We've had about 1,000 comments. Nobody seems to believe that he'll actually have the guts to do it. Do you?
Well, I don't think it's for me to say and to make windows into the Prime Minister's soul and to guess what he will or won't do. But I think it's very important to remember the old Rwanda plan failed in the domestic courts and in the ECHR. And in many ways, the ECHR was a bit silly by jumping the gun and issuing that injunction, which meant we all paid attention to it suddenly. If they hadn't done that, then the old Rwanda plan would have failed in the domestic courts and nobody would be talking about the ECHR. So now my view is, and I've gone public on this already, I've written it, I've spoken here and elsewhere on this, my view is that the new Rwanda plan will also fail in the domestic courts and in the ECHR. And if the ECHR has any sense, they will therefore let it fail in the domestic courts first, so that nobody talks about the ECHR. It does seem a bit funny to sort of pin the ECHR and our membership of it to this policy in particular. I mean, why this policy? You know, the membership of the ECHR is a fundamental question. We send it millions of pounds. It has, I think, 47, although 2 of them are suspended, judges from a very diverse range of countries. Now, that's not, I don't ever wish to be rude to another nation. So I'll pick out this one purely because I've been on their national radio, so I'm vaguely fond of them. But, you know, the Slovak Republic has a totally different legal tradition to this country. What benefit does a Slovak Republic judge, a Slovak Republic lawyer, add to my legal system? You know, putting the ECHR in just puts a load of non-experts at the top of your legal system. I mean, I don't know anything about the Slovak legal system. You wouldn't appoint me to be judge over that. And so this is a political court which carries out political actions. It's already done something which I think is a fundamental assault on our constitution, Martin, which in a Romanian case, it's ruled that a judge can say things which are political. Now, I do not believe the UK constitution allows judges, sitting judges, to say things which are political, and what the Romanian judge said was quite outrageous. Now, why on earth would our constitution be changed by an office building in Strasbourg with lots of judges from totally different legal traditions? These are fundamental questions for your viewers to answer, and they are for your viewers, not for me to tell your viewers whether they want to be in or out of the ECHR. I am appearing as a lawyer. You know, I will explain the ECHR to them for your viewers to make that decision.
Stephen, I want to put this question to you as well. Is the ECHR just something of a bogeyman under the bed? Because we've seen in Italy, for example, Giorgia Meloni, they're a member of the ECHR. In fact, they're still a member of the European Union. And they simply turned boats away from landing on their shores. They also did a deal with Albania and just stepped around all of this. So my next question is, Stephen, is being a member even an issue? Is actually the question. We don't have politicians with the guts to just go around it and put sovereignty first.
Well, see, I think this goes back to those idea of differing legal traditions, because it's perfectly true to say that France has just ignored the ECHR completely and is deporting people. The EU promised to join it in a legally binding treaty, so is in breach of international law by not having joined it, but hasn't joined it because it won't let the EU do. If the EU joins it, it won't be able to do what it's doing. And it's doing some quite brutal things that I don't think any current British politician would suggest anything as brutal as what the EU is planning to do in order to challenge migration. So we have to consider it from our legal tradition. Our legal tradition is actually that we follow the law. I mean, there have been studies of the other members of the ECHR, and a lot of them do just ignore the rulings. And they can do that, but that's not how our system works. We're a system designed to have non-political courts and therefore binding decisions, lawfully, legally binding decisions, even on our government, from our non-political courts. And these other countries don't have that system. They have a system where courts are allowed to be a bit political. I mean, even the EU, the courts are charged with advancing ever closer union. Well, that's a political policy. That's a political court. You know, so we just have to understand, is this the best setup for us as a nation and us as a legal system? Is it making anything better? And we do have to consider that maybe we have the best judges in the world, and maybe they don't need outside assistance and help. I mean, the current Rwanda, the old Rwanda bill, it was lawfully right. What the Supreme Court did was I think, right to stop the old bill. When this one fails, as I believe it will be lawfully right that it fails, because what the failure is that the MPs, the government, has failed to draft a law that works. So, that's our tradition, that if they draft a law and it doesn't work, well, our courts will say so. And if they draft a law and it does work and the courts don't like it, our courts will ignore that and say it works. We don't have a view on whether we like things or not, say our courts. We only have a view on whether they work. And that is our legal tradition. And we have to think about what is best for our legal tradition and for us.
Stephen, can I quickly ask you, if it were ever tabled that we were to leave the ECHR, which seems very unlikely, particularly because we seem to be in the final furlong of this government, the Labour Party would certainly, I believe, have no appetite to do the same, you would surely see the entire legal system launch into a huge frenzy to prevent it anyway.
Well, I wouldn't. And I would expect those who are not able to be political to not be political. And I might find an awful lot of time going on to mention that it is not for lawyers. Of course we have legal opinions, of course we do, but those are not expert opinions, those are personal opinions. And if I appear on this show as a lawyer, I will share expert opinion, and I will keep all my personal opinions entirely to myself. Leaving the ECHR is perfectly possible in law. There's a mild bit of trickiness with the Good Friday Agreement, but that is so badly drafted as an agreement that I don't think it would be difficult to navigate at all, as in I don't consider that really very challenging as law. And there is a mildly tricky bit with the current the agreement with the EU. But again, that I think you can get out of that. I think there are ways of getting out of that so that this country can just leave. We don't have to belong to these institutions and these international institutions. We are an independent sovereign state, and that's just true as law. And there's but if a lawyer gives an opinion telling you to leave the ECHR or telling you to stay in the ECHR, they have stopped being a lawyer and they've become a politician. The other untruth that I would fight if it started being said is that leaving the ECHR will not change human rights in this country. Okay, these are fundamental rights often, and we've started seeing it. So the Lady Chief Justice, brilliantly, in a recent criminal case, said, "Oh well, we can't do this because of this human right." And then she put after that, and of course the corresponding common law right that still also exists. So we didn't really gain anything new with this. All it's done is import this court, which is a totally different legal tradition to ours and which is political. And membership of it or not is the choice of your viewers and our voters, not of me as an expert or anyone else as an expert.
OK, Stephen Barrett, barrister and writer, and concise, to the point, apolitical, fantastic as ever. Thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock as electric vehicle sales slump. It's a green revolution based on faulty logic. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
One more story in. Milton Keynes, absolute chaos in the city. 300-odd youths arrested or at least involved in a
stampede.
A stampede. Yeah, what's been going on?
A stampede through the...
there we are.
This is the video. So this is a stampede through a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. I think, Amy, you live there, don't you? You live nearby.
For those on radio, we can see literally hundreds, scores of kids.
I think there are about 300 kids.
Are they in school uniform?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah. This is as they've broken up from school, presumably.
Security tried to intervene. They've been accused of being heavy-handed. But I think this speaks to the fact that The landscape of youth services has just been decimated, and there's literally nothing for kids.
So hang on, whoa. You think that this has happened because social services have been diluted?
Youth services.
This is because there's no police around, there's no oversight, there's no deterrent, and 300 kids think that they can run through a shopping centre, frightening shoppers out of their lives.
Going to a shopping
Amy,
centre.
sorry, my kids would not be behaving like that because there's no ping pong available at the local
Aren't your kids like
youth
age
centre.
4 and 5? These are teenagers, and our teenagers are headed into a world where there are no leisure services.
Oh,
there are
it's got
no
nothing to do with
support
crime.
services. It has
If we up the
everything
ante
to
on
do-
basketball, it's not going to stop kids being stabbed on the street.
What creates antisocial behaviour is having nothing to
No,
do.
it's lack of discipline in the home, lack of discipline in the home, and lack of policing on the
What did
streets,
you
and a judiciary and a penal system that is utterly liberal.
You're going right to the end of the line. What about the preventative
But
measures?
what about the people that these people affect by running through a shopping centre and stampeding? When there's mothers with kids in prams frightened out of their lives, and we're worried about the social services
I'm
aspect
talking about
that's
carrot.
perhaps led
You're
to it.
talking about stick,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So how long does your solution take to resolve it? Mine takes about 30 seconds. More police, bang them up. Yours...
Russell, should parents be fined?
More police bang up.
Absolutely. And the kids should be taken to task.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, North Lanarkshire. The southbound M73, now the slip road that takes you off there onto the northbound M74, closed and queuing for an overturned lorry. M1 queuing northbound, firstly around Loughborough Junction 23, the inside lane's coned off. There's been an accident. Northbound M12, Luton North 11A up to Flitwick at 12. Delays for emergency repairs, again a lane closure in place. Very slow on the M25 in a couple of spots this afternoon, an hour's worth of queues clockwise, 3 lanes shut. St Albans Junction 22 queuing back to Kings Langley at 20 for a multi-vehicle bump, and the earlier collision anti-clockwise towards the Dartford Tunnel, that's cleared, but we're still seeing queues on the cameras heading back towards Orpington at Junction 4 this afternoon. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, Britain's automotive industry is going from strength to strength, with new car registrations recording their 20th consecutive month of growth. And that's according to new figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturer and Traders. But, and it's a big but, it's not great news for electric vehicles or EVs, as you can see on your screen there, as demand fell last month, with the average buyer saying they're put off by high prices, recharge times and poor charging infrastructure. Well, joining us now is spokesperson for SMMT, and it's Mr. James Bowley. Welcome to the show, James. So this makes for pretty grim reading for the EV sector, it seems, no matter how much we're nudged or prodded. Certainly when it comes to private individuals rather than fleets and businesses, there simply doesn't seem to be a great uptake in electric vehicles. Why do you think that's happening?
So it's quite important to look at the whole market. So it is a tale of two different kinds of buyers. On the one hand, as you say, you have the fleets and businesses, which are buying more battery electric cars than ever. And in fact, they're buying so many that last month, we saw more new battery electric cars registered than at any other month previously in the UK. But you're absolutely right. In terms of the private buyer, that's your average retail consumer, someone who's going into a dealership to pick up a car. We're seeing a decline in the number of battery electric cars that are going to those kinds of buyers. And that's a fairly straightforward reason why that is at the moment. So if you're a business or a fleet, you get lots of different kind of tax benefits and incentives which really help you sort of get that acquisition cost down for that electric car, and helps your business to maximize using those lower running costs that you can hopefully enjoy from using an electric car. If you're a consumer, since July of 2022, there's been no incentive provided by the government for you to purchase an electric car. There used to be a grant. That's now no longer the case. And so what's really important now is to help re-energize that consumer market, to help ordinary buyers get behind electric cars, get into electric cars, because ultimately the nation's got green goals to hit for 2050. We have net zero targets, and that's only possible if everyone can make that switch.
The trouble with that, of course, at the moment we have lots of stick and no carrot. We have clean air zones, we have ULEZ, we have punitive taxation that rows backwards and pulls in hybrids when they told us it wouldn't. But there's a scant amount of carrots. The incentive, as you quite rightly point out, those benefits to encourage us to go green. And some of the figures today, there's been a 9.2% increase in petrol engine sales, the biggest plug-in hybrids plus 37%, electric vehicles only 3.8%. Is it something more fundamental? And that is when people just look at the cost and the benefits and the analysis and the way that the legislation is going, they just don't want electric cars.
So the big challenge is that we always hear from consumers the reasons why they want to hold off going to an electric car. It always tends to be the initial purchase price of the vehicle, and it tends to be concerns about the charge point infrastructure as well. So in terms of the initial purchase cost for the vehicle, of course, the fleets get the incentive. We would like to see consumers getting that carrot, as you put it. That's really important. So halving VAT on new electric cars on a temporary basis, that could dramatically increase the number of electric cars available to consumers coming to our roads. And it makes perfect sense based on what we already do with other kind of green technologies. For instance, if you're a consumer and you're installing solar panels or putting in a heat pump, you don't pay VAT on that. So halving VAT on electric cars, that would send the right message that the right time to switch is right now. Now, we also want to see more happening with the charge point infrastructure as well. Now, charge point infrastructure, the number of charge points available, that's increasing every single day and rollout is continuing. That needs to keep going and accelerate and keep pace and needs to be built ahead of need so people have that confidence they can find an electric charge point whenever and wherever they need one. And also, importantly, you have to remember, of course, that about a third of the country doesn't have access to a driveway or their own parking space. So if those people are to move to an electric car, they'll be dependent on the public charge point network. Now, if you charge on the public network at the moment, you'll pay effectively a payment penalty. You'll pay 20% VAT on the electricity from that charge point. If you can install a charger at home, you only pay 5%. So what's really important to make this a faster and fairer transition for everyone is to also equalise that tax rate to reduce the rate of VAT that people pay on public charge points.
Now, I've got a question for you. So I live in Zone 2 London, and people like electric cars, but even on my street, there's probably 4 points on the street lamps where you can plug in. I have about 100 vehicles, and this is an area that's very supportive of the notion. But to roll out something like that nationwide, I mean, we can't even fix the potholes. How on earth can a government put a charging network in across the nation that can support this infrastructure when they're potless?
So it's not just down to government to install that network. This is a partnership between government and the private sector. There's going to be a huge market for charge point use in the future. There are mandated targets for electric vehicle sales up to 2030, and we know that from 2035, you won't be able to buy a new petrol or diesel powered car. You'll be moving to electric. So there's a huge investment opportunity for charge point providers to move in and to put those charge points in place. And what we really like to see is for that to really just to happen. Then that market is coming through at present. We know the vehicles are coming to the road. We know that millions more electric cars will be on the road over the next few years. And so there's that great opportunity for that charge point investment.
OK, superb stuff. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Spokesperson for SMMT, James Bodie. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Now, coming up, what's said on the terraces at the football haunt you afterwards? Well, one Wrexham football fan has been given a 3-year ban for his football war cries. If you ask me, they were perfectly acceptable. But then I'm Martin Daubney, and I'm on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again and welcome to the GB News forecast with the Met Office. Further rain arrives overnight. It's going to stay cold in the north, and as the rain moves into Scotland, there will be some disruptive snow over the hills north of the Central Belt. A number of systems coming our way over the next few days. The next low brings spells of rain and hill snow across the UK, and then another low for the weekend. Storm Kathleen, named by Met Erin because the strongest winds will be for the Republic of Ireland. But it will be blustery overnight, nevertheless, with some heavy rain in places. Those spells of rain particularly affecting northern and western parts of the country, although the far north of Scotland staying clear of that, with a touch of frost in places. But it's across central Scotland where there's the risk of disruption as we start off Friday. Rain disruption for lower parts of the Central Belt, and for higher parts of the Central Belt and into central Scotland, the risk of some disruptive snow up to 10 centimetres or so above 300 metres. Could cause some issues first thing. That peters out through the day and it stays cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's a mild day. Early rain clears to showers, some sunny spells in between the downpours, with highs of 18 or even 19 Celsius towards the southeast. Another blustery day on Saturday. In fact, it becomes increasingly windy as heavy rain moves north across Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing, replaced by showers. Some sunshine in between the showers. The wind will be strong with gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour for Western Britain and Northern Ireland, but it will also be a warm wind, highs of 20 or 21 Celsius.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. I've been sending in your emails since the start of the show. The big topic I asked you on was, do you believe Rishi Sunak when he says he's going to leave the ECHR if the Rwanda flights don't get off the ground? Now, I've had over 1,000 responses to this one in the past 2 hours, and it has to be said, there's not a lot of belief in what Rishi Sunak is saying. Let me give you a flavour of what's happening out there now. Yvonne says this: politicians should have left the ECHR a long time ago. We're already overrun with immigrants in this country, but politicians are not standing up for the human rights of British citizens. Rather, they're standing up for the human rights of those who come to our country illegally. Adam Brooks, hi Adam, says this. This is on X. We all know that Rishi won't. I believe he's lying. It's election for the public, it's PR for the election. Rishi hasn't backed up anything he's ever promised. Only the truly gullible will fall for this. Suella Braverman must be laughing her head off at all of these lies. Dear Auntie says this: he's done another U-turn on too much to expect any trust now just because an election is coming and is in the air. Rishi needs to stop rattling and start rolling and doing and instead of talking. And next up we have D. D says this: this is pure posturing, in my opinion. That's all this bloke seems to know how to do. Giles adds this: let's give Rishi a break. He says, let's stop being so negative. Give Rishi a break. We do need to leave the ECHR. They don't care about Britain, only themselves. And Kathy said, I'm afraid it's always talk but no action with the Conservative government. I voted Conservative all my life, but I won't be doing that anymore. Haywood says this, not a chance. The only thing Rishi is good at these days is talking a good game. He doesn't seem to follow through with anything. He's run out of road, and anyway, the lawyers will simply stymie him if he even tries to get this over the line. Nia says this is now just a distraction and an election gimmick. And Amanda adds, if he does, he needs to enact a human rights law for Britain. Let's give Rishi a chance. A real mixed bag there. We also asked you earlier on about soft sentencing. So the conditioning of the sentencing guideline rules are being overhauled to give those from disadvantaged backgrounds more leeway in the courts. Could that create a two-tiered justice system? Well, you got in touch in your droves on that one. Ray says this, deport the foreign nationals from UK prisons. That would clear 10 to 12% of the space for starters. I'm not sure if those figures are true, but I get your point. David adds this, why not leave the sentencing as it is, but double sentences for people from privileged backgrounds? David, I suspect your tongue is firmly in your cheek there, but it does, I believe, the sentencing guideline lay down that kind of wiggle room to cause upset. People will be coming into courts and their lawyers will be sharpening their pencils, looking for any misdemeanour at all in that person's past. And the thing that really sent up a flag to me was the notion that if a person has experienced any form of discrimination at any point ever in their lives, then that could be used as a legal defence. And so it's a race to the bottom, surely. This is people who will be looking for every hardship they've ever suffered, putting it down on their rap sheet, going into a court of law and saying, I didn't really mean it, Your Honour, please can I have a get out of jail card? And here's the point. The jails are full. We need to be building more jails. We're not doing that. Instead, we're trying to get people off the hook. Alex Chalk, the Justice Minister, said we need to be letting prisoners out early for good behaviour. So what we have is people from bad backgrounds who made bad choices, who may have had bad experiences, being let off. And those who pay their taxes and abide the law and don't go the wrong side of that line, being punished. Now that is a two-tier judiciary. That goes, for me, against the entire ethos of a democratic, fair, representative nation where we have true equality before the law. And I worry, actually, that we will have people from BAME backgrounds, perhaps, he will say, well, I've suffered all my life from discrimination, and therefore I should get softer sentencing. I think it's an entire can of worms. And yet in Scotland, on April the 1st, they're now proposing we lock people up for jokes, for misgendering. The whole thing has gone topsy-turvy. Have we gone through the looking glass? You can get nicked for a joke, but you won't get nicked if you come from a disadvantaged background. Has the country gone completely bonkers? You let me know. Coming up, softer sentences with a deprived background. Does the sentencing guidelines let you off? Well, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. First is your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the GB News forecast with the Met Office. Further rain arrives overnight. It's going to stay cold in the north, and as the rain moves into Scotland, there will be some disruptive snow over the hills north of the Central Belt. A number of systems coming our way over the next few days. The next low brings spells of rain and hill snow across the UK, and then another low for the weekend. Storm Kathleen, named by Met Erin because the strongest winds will be for the Republic of Ireland. But it will be blustery overnight, nevertheless, with some heavy rain in places. Those spells of rain particularly affecting northern and western parts of the country, although the far north of Scotland staying clear of that, with a touch of frost in places. But it's across central Scotland where there's the risk of disruption as we start off Friday. Rain disruption for lower parts of the Central Belt and for higher parts of the Central Belt and into central Scotland The risk of some disruptive snow up to 10 centimetres or so above 300 metres could cause some issues first thing. That peters out through the day and it stays cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's a mild day. Early rain clears to showers, some sunny spells in between the downpours with highs of 18 or even 19 Celsius towards the southeast. Another blustery day on Saturday. In fact, it becomes increasingly windy as heavy rain moves north across Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing, replaced by showers. Some sunshine in between the showers. The wind will be strong with gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour for Western Britain and Northern Ireland, but it will also be a warm wind, highs of 20 or 21 Celsius.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Brand new Sundays from 6 p.m. The Neil Oliver Show.
It's absolutely vital that people are given the opportunity to take part in the debate, to say the things that matter to them, to be challenged. A country is only really a shared dream. As long as enough people have a shared idea of what it is, then that country exists. What GB News does is give voices somewhere they can be heard.
The Neil Oliver Show. Sundays from 6 p.m. on GB News.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. To the southeast of Glasgow, the southbound M73, the exit slip that takes you on toward the northbound M74 remains closed off. There's an overturned lorry still causing queues. Congestion for the northbound M1, firstly Luton North 11A up to Flitwick at 12. A lane shut for emergency repairs tailing back to Luton Airport at 10 in patches. Also northbound at Loughborough 23, still queuing, although an earlier collision has now been recovered. Big queues for the M25 clockwise before St Albans 22, tailing back for an hour towards Watford at 19, 3-lane shut for a multi-vehicle collision. Clockwise queuing for 45 minutes before Dartford, long delays heading back towards Lakeside at junction 30, and that's all due to an earlier bump there too. And for now, that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, is it time for more lenient sentences? Well, judges are being told to consider softer punishments for those who they believe are from disadvantaged backgrounds. Has two-tier policing become a two-tier judiciary? And could this become a thug's charter? Next up, electric car downturn as sales of EVs slump. Is the government's rush to net zero coming at the cost of British infrastructure? Or is it time to admit people just don't want electric cars? After that, Labour supermajority surge because a poll reveals that 11 Tory cabinet ministers will be wiped out at the next general election, and Sir Keir Starmer's party will win 400 seats. Is Labour now unstoppable as we head for a tsunami worse than 1997? And as a Wrexham football fan is handed a 3-year ban order for shouting abuse at English fans, which actually I felt was perfectly acceptable. Is a desire to crack down on hooliganism a threat to free speech? Are our terraces becoming a woke joke? That's all coming in your next hour. Thank you for joining me. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company on an afternoon. You've been getting in touch in your thousands today. The big topic that's got you going is Rishi Sunak saying that he will leave the ECHR if those Rwanda flights don't take off. Has to be said, there's not a great deal of belief out there amongst you. You're feeling now this is more empty rhetoric. But come on, dig in. Let's find some positivity. Is there still hope? Do you still believe we can stand up to Strasbourg and let sovereignty rule supreme? Or is this all empty words and softer sentencing? Is it really time to let people from disadvantaged backgrounds off the hook? What about the people who live in their same neighbourhoods? They don't get any preferential treatment. Is two-tier judiciary a nightmare for Britain? Loads to get our teeth into. But first, let's have your latest news headlines, and it's time for Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom today is that the mastermind of an armed robbery in Yorkshire 19 years ago that ended in a police officer being shot dead has been found guilty of her murder. If you're watching on television, there's CCTV footage showing the moment 2 police officers were gunned down in the street as they arrived at the scene of the armed robbery in 2005. The 38-year-old police officer died after she interrupted a raid at a family-run travel agent's in Bradford. She'd only been a police officer for 9 months. Well, Pirandita Khan flew to Pakistan 2 months after the murder and remained at large until he was arrested in 2020. And he's the last of the 7 men involved in the robbery to be convicted. In other news today, the Prime Minister says Britain could pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights if it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak says controlling illegal migration is more important than membership of the ECHR, and he wouldn't let a foreign court interfere in sovereign matters. Meanwhile, more than 600 British legal experts, including 3 former Supreme Court judges, are calling on the UK government to stop selling arms to Israel. They say there's a plausible risk the weapons may be used to commit serious violations of international law and that the Prime Minister must change Britain's policy. The leader of the Liberal Democrats is calling for a new system to flag which of Britain's waterways are safe for swimming. Causes of waterborne diseases such as dysentery have soared recently by nearly 60% in figures since 2010, while overflows of spilled sewage into rivers and seas in 2023 were more than double the previous year. So Ed Davies says something needs to be done to make sure people know which waters are safe for swimming.
The Environment Agency, Ofwat and the government need to be cracking down on companies to make sure they're not just giving money to their shareholders and to their executives, but actually investing that money to clean up rivers like the River Nid. And we want to actually raise standards, so we're calling for a new blue flag status for rivers like the River Nid, which would give a signal to people that it would be safe to swim in these rivers. People used to do that, but now if they do that, children end up getting awful diseases from the E. coli and the bacteria from the sewage and ending up in hospital. That's unacceptable, so we need to raise standards, and that's what Liberal Democrats are campaigning for.
British farmers are calling for a guaranteed basic income after post-Brexit arrangements left many worse off. At least 100 have joined a campaign group urging the government to help cover their basic costs after the loss of subsidies from the European Union. Analysis last year by the organic farming group Riverford found that half of Britain's fruit and vegetable growers may go out of business within a year. And that comes as suppliers warn of higher prices and empty supermarket shelves due to new post-Brexit border charges, which will be introduced at the end of the month. Judges have been told to consider more lenient sentencing for offenders from deprived or difficult backgrounds. The Sentencing Council, which sets guidelines for judges and magistrates, has for the very first time outlined mitigating factors that it says courts should consider before handing down a sentence. They include poverty, low education, discrimination and insecure housing. But critics say the law should treat everyone equally, with the Justice Secretary Alex Chalk describing the guidelines as patronising and inaccurate. Leicester City Council says sensitive information has been posted online by a known ransomware group after it was stolen in a cyber attack. The local authority was the victim of a hack last month, forcing it to shut down its IT systems. It's confirmed that confidential documents have now been published by that group of hackers, including rent statements and personal details. The group is known to have hacked another number of government education departments like Education, Healthcare and others. The National Cybersecurity Centre is now involved in that ongoing criminal investigation. Now, air passengers face another year of limits on liquids in their carry-on luggage. Several British airports will miss a June deadline to introduce a new high-tech 3D scanner, which is supposed to end the need to remove things like laptops and liquids on flights. That means the 100 millilitre limit on liquids will remain for now, despite long-promised changes allowing up to 2 litres. And just lastly, the world's oldest man has just died, just 2 months before he would have celebrated his 115th birthday. Juan Vicente Perez was born in Venezuela in 1909, nearly 20 years before the first radio station even started broadcasting in his country. There were 6 British monarchs during his long lifetime and 20 US presidents. His death was announced by the governor of the region where he'd lived, who described him as a humble, hard-working and peaceful man. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, judges have been advised to consider more lenient sentences for offenders from so-called deprived or difficult backgrounds. And suggestions come from the Sentencing Council, who are responsible for advising judges and magistrates across the land. And the guidelines on difficult and/or deprived backgrounds state that these factors include poverty, low educational attainment, experience of discrimination, and even insecure housing. But are these valid reasons for going soft on criminals, or is this the beginning of a two-tiered judiciary? Well, I'm now joined in the studio by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome back. Always a joy. Why are they looking at changing something that's worked for ages and ages and ages? Why meddle now?
Because of I think because the situation with the prisons, 98 capacity full. This is the Sentencing Council, which gives guidance out to judges. This guidance came in on Monday. The politicians aren't happy. Blue-collar Tories call it extremely patronising. The Justice Secretary, Lord Chancellor Alex Chalk, he's less than happy. Of course, the Tories are quite happy. They can look at like they're attacking judges for soft justice, but for me, the judges are probably moving because they can see how full the jails are. They want to make sure the right people are jailed. If they're looking for mitigating factors here amongst those who are offending, they're looking at if they're from deprived or difficult backgrounds, including poverty, low educational attainment, experience of discrimination, insecure housing. Those are reasons why someone might go down a criminal route compared to someone from a more prosperous background. So taking into account how someone's brought up is a way of working out whether prison is right for them. The big picture, as I say, is overflowing prisons. Now, there was a sentencing bill announced by the King in the King's speech last November. Hasn't yet appeared because there's dozens of Tory MPs trying to stop the government from banning jail terms of less than a year. They think, Tories like Suella Braverman think, you should be in prison for even less than a year if you're very, very dangerous.
Now, the lawyers must be rubbing their hands together, sharpening their quills at the prospect of being able to trawl through any thug or offender's previous convictions or even their early life, looking for any example, any scintilla of oppression or poor treatment at school, you name it, saying, oh, look, my client suffered discrimination, therefore they should get a more lenient sentence. Meanwhile, people living in the same communities who never put a foot wrong, who pay their taxes, they don't get any preferential treatment. This is a thug's charter.
You would say that, Martin. I think that would be disputed by the judges, and certainly lawyers are doing what they should do, which is to try and do the best by their client. This is guidance for judges, not for lawyers. So it's just the judges to have in their back pocket to guide how they sentence, but not really one for lawyers to help and support them that way. And certainly for the issue of victims, I mean, the judges will be mindful about if you're releasing someone into the community, that person mustn't be able to go near the victims and keep them apart.
All right, let's move on now swiftly, if we can, to the ECHR. Rishi Sunak talking tough. He was on The Sun, never mind the ballots, last night, saying possibly, if, just maybe, we might pull out of the ECHR. GB News viewers, has to be said, Chris, they're not really believing it. What do you reckon?
Well, as we know, these judges in Strasbourg have been frustrating attempts to remove people from this country to Rwanda, where the government is trying to move people, if they arrive here illegally, to break the business model of the people traffickers. Sunak last night said very briefly, I don't believe that border security and making sure that we can control illegal migration is more important than membership of a foreign court, because it's fundamental to our sovereignty as a country. Foreign court, in his world, is the Strasbourg court, which the UK has signed up to. I've asked Number 10 what this means. They're saying that if it comes to it, and if the ECHR was blocking the Rwanda flights, we will consider leaving it, yes. So there's several ifs there. This isn't a place where Mr Sunak wants to be. He knows that he would divide his party if he said, let's leave the ECHR. Some on the right say, go for it, Rishi. Those on the left think, no, how can we lecture China about their human rights laws if we leave the ECHR ourselves? So this will be a battle, I think, on sovereignty, going to the election. How do you square the circle and keep everyone happy? It might be a review of membership of the ECHR, could be an area with the Tories might look at supporting.
Well, I've taken legal counsel during the show.
Have you?
Had a human rights lawyer.
Which case is this?
Well, we had a human rights lawyer, David Hay, who actually deals in cases on this every day. We had Stephen Barrett, the barrister. They both said the same thing. This is a red herring. France went around the ECHR and controlled their borders. Italy, Giorgia Meloni declared a state of emergency, sent boats away, wouldn't let them even land, and did a deal with Albania on offshore containment. They're still in the EU, let alone the European Court of Human Rights. Is this creating a bogeyman? As you said, they can rally against Strasbourg, just like they can rally against soft judges on softer sentencing. In actual fact, they could just get tough and declare sovereignty and go around them anyway.
Ignore parts of the ECHR. There is suggestions I'm looking into that some of these Section 39 orders, these so-called pyjama injunctions, are being watered down, that they can apply for by these judges in Strasbourg. So we'll see where that goes. That's certainly what Number 10 will be hoping. But they were saying, they're talking about these hypothetical pyjama injunctions, so when everyone's gone to bed and these flights stop taking off at the 11th hour.
Yeah, do you think that that's going to happen? Because, I mean, we haven't seen a single flight take off for Rwanda. Again, I keep coming back to the pint of beer that you've got as a bet with Rishi Sunak. just seems to be the clock is ticking down and down and down now.
April the 18th is a date when the Safety Rwanda Act should become law. After that, will be a 6-week period when the letters will go out to those who want to take across to Rwanda, try and break this business model. Lawyers will get their claws in, to use your language, and stuck in to try and challenge and stop that happening. But there'll be a 6-week battle in the courts coming up, and that'll be when I think this idea about ECHR membership will become tested again.
Well, lots for us political journalists to get our teeth into. Anyway, Christopher Hope, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us in the studio as ever. Now, you get lots more on that story on our website, and thanks to you, gbnews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. So fast, it's making Chris Hope sneeze. It's got breaking news and all the brilliant analysis you've come to expect from GB News. Now, earlier this afternoon, we heard from the police about the investigation into legacy funeral directors. You may recall last month, police arrested 2 people and removed 35 bodies over concerns about the storage and management processes in the Hull-based independent funeral director, meaning some bodies may have been mixed up. And the police said today that they were unable to identify the ashes due to DNA degradation, a quite astonishing case. Let's bring in our Yorkshire and Humber reporter now, Anna Riley. Anna, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. An astonishing, grotesque case that's captivated the nation. What's the latest?
It really is, Martin. Yes, the Humberside Police gave that press conference this afternoon. We're actually here now on Hessel Road in Hull. This is where the 35 bodies were removed from the legacy funeral directors. They've actually taken down their signage. You may be able to see behind as well that floral tribute has been laid. The police this afternoon, as you've mentioned, said that the high temperatures required for cremations meant that no meaningful DNA could be recovered from the ashes that they had taken. They said they'd been in contact with 700 families to offer support and give condolences. This update comes a month on from when the investigation began. It's involved over 100 officers from Humberside Police. The force said that they've been working round the clock on this case, and they've also been working with the National Crime Agency as part of the investigation. A 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman were arrested on suspicion of prevention of a lawful and decent burial, fraud by false representation and fraud by abuse of position, and they have since been bailed. Humberside Police have previously described the investigation as highly complex, and the work has included the management of recovered ashes. The council also spoke out in the press conference this afternoon. They said that they feel that it's clear from the visits to all funeral directors in East Yorkshire that the incident being investigated with legacy funeral directors was in no way reflective of the wider funeral industry. Police also said that they have their helpline open for families that may want to contact them, and that they've so far received over 2,000 calls. There's obviously been an outpouring of shock and grief from the local community and nationally, as well as we can see just here from the floral tributes. And also family members have come forward as well and spoken to the press. This will be yet another blow for them, this news from the police this afternoon. One gentleman telling the press that he didn't believe the ashes that he was given in fact belonged to his wife. Another woman saying that she believed she'd kissed an empty coffin at a funeral. She didn't believe that the body of her loved one was inside it. So this investigation will continue, and families have also been told by the local MP Emma Hardy affected families would not have to pay for another funeral, with costs being picked up by the local authority using funds given by the government. And of course, when we do have more updates on this tragic case, we will be able to bring them.
Thank you, Anna Riley. That's our Yorkshire and Humber reporter live from Hull. A simply breathtaking case. Thank you for bringing us up to date. Now, it's our biggest giveaway of the year so far. It's your chance to win a £10,000 Greek cruise for two, 10 grand in cold, hard, tax-free cash, and a whole host of luxury travel gifts on top. Now, your 2025 holiday could be on us here at GB News, and here's the details that you need to enter.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff, Philly Boots. Now, coming up, is Britain's love affair with electric cars over? More to the point, did it ever even really begin? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know what, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But really, just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have
gay
been
icon.
transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:24. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, Britain's automotive industry is going from strength to strength, with new car registrations recording their 20th consecutive month of growth. That's according to the new figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturer and Traders. But it's not great news for electric vehicles, or EVs, as you can see on your screens there, because demand has fallen for them last month. with the average buyer saying they're put off by high prices, recharge times and poor charging infrastructure. Well, join me now in GB News' economics and business editor Liam Halligan in our Westminster studio. Just got a bit of a mouthful there. Now, Liam, you've been saying for many, many moons, you've seen this go in, like most things, you call it, right? The will is there, the virtue signal is there, but the demand simply doesn't match it.
I just don't think EVs are the future. I don't think the technology's there yet. And I think, you know, shrewd buyers, ordinary British men and women, sense this. And so why should the second biggest thing that they ever buy in their lives, their car, be something that they don't actually want to buy? And we're seeing that in these numbers. Let's just get that graph back up on the screen, Martin, because it needs just a little bit of explanation, if I may. You'll see there that this is the demand over the last year for diesel cars. That's actually down by about 5%, as you'd expect. But you see there, that second bar, battery electric, that's EVs. That's up just over 5%, whereas actual car demand overall is up 10%. So EV demand is going up less than car demand as a whole, which means that market share is falling, even though they're meant to be the future. There you see plug-in hybrid. They're the big winners. What's a plug-in hybrid? That's a car with a internal combustion engine that you can also plug in to top it up, so you don't have that range anxiety. So you get the undoubted benefits of cheaper motoring because you can plug in, but you don't get the range anxiety because you can still use petrol or diesel in your car. And it seems that people are going for plug-in hybrids. And it's not just me saying this. Look, I've been saying to you for a while, Martin, that I don't think the technology is there for EV vehicles, that they may mean we're too reliant on so-called rare earths from countries like China and parts of Africa, all the copper you need in an electric vehicle, the sheer weight of an electric vehicle, the fact that all the batteries are made in China, the kind of geopolitical dangers of that. And listen up, pin back your ears. This is Carlo Tavares. He's the head of the car-making giant Stellantis, one of the biggest car makers in the world. I was up on Stellantis's factory on Ellesmere Port there, up in the northwest of England quite recently. Stellantis's brands include Vauxhall, Peugeot, Fiat. They really are a super brand. And this is Carlo Tavares on EVs, warning that EVs, electric vehicles, are unlikely to ever be universally popular among drivers. And this is a bloke, you know, one of the leading EV car makers in the world. They make more EV vans than any other company in Britain. And this is what he said: we should move away from a dogmatic thinking where one size fits all, says Carlos Tavares, the head of Stellantis. I don't think this is going to work. Repeat, I don't think this is going to work. What I would like to add is that the current EVs can be a solution for some of our societies. Mr. Tavares saying that the 500 kilograms, half a metric ton of raw materials you need to produce an EV battery, quotes, isn't sustainable. A technological breakthrough is required to half the weight of battery packs over the next decade. That's what myself and some other sages in the pub have been saying for 2 years.
Yeah, astonishing stuff. And all that extra weight, of course, adds the biggest pollutant to the air, particulates, because they chew up tyres. I digress. When will reality bite for the policymakers? Because they're going to ban diesel and petrol cars in 2035, or so they maintain. If the guy that makes them saying that's going to work, when are they going to wake up and smell the coffee?
I think what Carlos Tavares is saying is that EVs aren't the sort of catch-all, universal solution. They are part of the solution. You know, I don't doubt that. They are part of the solution, but I don't think they are so much of the solution that we should be forcing people by law to buy them. The market doesn't work like that. Well, how does somebody in Whitehall know better than, you know, all the car technologists in the world, what they may be thinking in 3 years' time? They just don't know better. It's just arrogant to convince yourself that you can make other people by law buy a certain product. We have seen a little bit of reality coming into this debate. The UK, for instance, it was going to be 2030 when new petrol and diesel manufacturing cars would be made illegal. It's now 2035. Of course, shock horror. My God, we're giving up our commitment to net zero. No, we're not. We're just going to where the rest of the EU is, actually.
Yeah, precisely.
So I don't think that was a particularly retrograde step. As I say, I do think EVs are part of the solution, but they are just part of the solution. I don't think, personally, that the battery technology is there yet. That's why you have companies basically demanding that the government bribes them to build gigafactories to build EV car batteries. That's why you've got this incredible port up in Blythe in the northeast of England, a perfect site for a gigafactory. It's hooked up to the national grid. It's near a deep water port, which Blythe is, and nobody wants to buy the site because they're not convinced, even with government funding, that the market is actually there yet. So it'd be really good if politicians passed laws that actually reflected technological reality rather than passing laws that make them heroes within their own dinner parties.
And quickly, Liam, of course, all this electricity that goes with this car is not powered by unicorns on treadmills anyway, is it? It's power stations that burn gas.
You know the novelist Lionel Shriver, not the sort of person you'd think of as a technology writer. Lionel Shriver, she's American, of course, she wrote an absolutely brilliant piece. It's one of those pieces that only a non-specialist can write. She says, hey, guess what? If we're going to have lots of electric cars, we need lots more electricity. And no one's thought of that. It's true, and it's not just in the UK, it's in the US as well. Even in the US, the national grid cannot keep up with the electric vehicle revolution, it seems to me. And even the technology behind the electric vehicle revolution can't keep up with the electric vehicle revolution. Again, I'm not some kind of Cassandra about this. I do think EVs are part of the solution. I'm not instinctively anti moving away from petrol and diesel cars if the technology's there. But it strikes me that the technology isn't there. You can see that in these sales figures from no other, the most authoritative source in the UK, the SMMT, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, and you can hear it in the very words of Carlos Tavares, who I say is the head of the car-making giant Stellantis, incorporating Vauxhall, Peugeot and Fiat. He is saying EVs, are they really the whole solution? I'm not so sure. I paraphrase, Martin, but not a lot.
Superb. Liam Halligan, always electrifying. Thanks for joining me in the studio here in Westminster. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock as we take a look at 4 years of Sir Keir Starmer as Labour leader. Is there still any insight into his plans if he becomes the next Prime Minister? But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour: the mastermind of an armed robbery in Yorkshire 19 years ago that ended in the death of a police officer has been found guilty of her murder. If you're watching on TV, footage have been released showing the two police officers as they responded to the emergency call arriving at the scene of the armed robbery in 2005. 38-year-old Sharon Beshanivsky died after she interrupted that raid, which took place at a travel agent's in Bradford. She'd only been a police officer for 9 months. Pirandita Khan flew to Pakistan 2 months after the murder and remained at large until he was arrested in 2020. Also in the news today, former Tory Minister Sir Alan Duncan is being investigated for comments he made which accused two Conservative peers of, in his words, doing the bidding of Israel's Prime Minister. Sir Alan says the investigation lacks substance and could prove dangerously harmful to the party's reputation. And the Prime Minister says Britain could pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights if it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak says controlling illegal migration is more important than membership of the ECHR, and he would not let what he called a foreign court interfere in sovereign matters. And look out, some parts of the UK could see temperatures as high as 20 degrees this weekend, warmer than cities like Madrid and Barcelona, while parts of Scotland is set for snow. And weather warnings have been issued for snowfall, wind and rain as Storm Kathleen barrels into the west of the country, the 11th named storm of the season in 8 months. Gusts of up to 70 miles an hour expected for the west coast, 50 miles an hour winds expected in other areas. Quite a mixed weather picture. Those are your latest news headlines. Sign up for GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For
for a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's check on today's numbers for you. And the pound buying you $1.2673 and €1.1662. The price of gold is £1,808.82 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed today at 7,975 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Cracking stuff. And joining me now is Bev Turner. Bev is standing in, of course, for Jubes and Co tonight, 6 till 7, right after me. Bev, are you there? Let there be light.
I am here, Martin. Good evening, everybody at home. Yeah, we've got a packed show coming up this evening. We're going to be talking about this extraordinary story. It's day one of this, but do not expect it to go away. This is the MPs who have been cyber honey trapped. What is wrong with them? One of them is a minister, a Tory minister, as far as we know, and a senior Labour MP as well, who've been trading messages, possibly pictures, with somebody masquerading as a love interest. And it turns out there might have been from a rogue government trying to get some information from our guys. Why are MPs so easily trapped with these sorts of stings? We're going to be talking about driving theory tests as well. Triple the number of people cheating on their theory test in the last 3 years. Why? Are young people just too lazy to sit an exam? Is it because English isn't good enough maybe for some people who want to get their driving licence here? And also this universal basic income story for farmers. We've got to do something for farmers, but is that the solution? And also the fact that we're eating twice as many takeaways now as we were before lockdowns. What has happened to us, Martin Daubney?
Well, I'm also about to cover that story. What's happened is, Bev, as you know, during lockdown, we were totally recalibrated to buy all of our stuff online. We became lazy, poor kind, expected the world to come to us, and those habits still continue. Bev, I know you're going to blast that one out of the water. 6 till 7, that's Bev Turner on Jubes and Co. Fantastic. All the best. OK, coming up, after 4 years of Sir Keir Starmer, what does the man have? What it takes to be Prime Minister? Has he got the X Factor? Will it even matter? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King. In Hampshire, the eastbound M27, there's a lane close on the entry slip road at junction 5 at Southampton Airport. Long delays after a breakdown. Hertfordshire, clockwise M25, long delays after an earlier accident just before junction 22 at St Albans. Delays back towards junction 18 at Chorleywood. Bedfordshire, northbound M1, there's a lane close and delays due to emergency repairs just between junction 11A at Dunstable and 12 at Flitwick. In Warwickshire, the M42 southbound, long delays. There's a lane closed after an accident just before junction 3A at the M40. Delays so back towards junction 6 at Birmingham Airport. And in Cheshire, the northbound M6, long delays after an earlier breakdown around junction 20 at the M56. Delays though going back towards Knutford services. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Men's mental health. Yeah. Men are starting to talk a lot more. Yeah. You've been through a lot of stuff that people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years for me have been very, very difficult. People see me on tour, performing, making music, but myself and my wife, we went through 2 miscarriages. Oh, wow. For us, that was a very devastating time and very difficult to know how to kind of process those emotions. And I guess as a man, I did the thing of bottling up my emotions, and where I feel comfortable to be able to express myself is in the studio, whereas, she had obviously a different reaction to, what happened to us, because not only was it happening to her mentally, psychologically, but it was happening to her physically as well. And I think what something that she really wanted to see from me was that sensitivity and that emotion. And I thought that as a man, being strong was trying to bottle up my emotions and just show her that, no, you know, that I'm being strong for her. But actually being strong is talking about it. And what's happened ever since I've started to talk about it is I've spoken to more men that have experienced baby loss. My wife forced out of me, you know, how do you feel? And I ended up as a mess on the floor. I was exasperating, crying, almost inconsolable. She was just holding me in her arms as we cried together, and we cried together. And I didn't realise I needed that release so badly. Like I said, I've been able to speak to other men, and we've been able to cry together, and they shared their own experiences, which they did similar to me. But actually, you know, as men, I feel like that conversation and that sensitivity and being able to be emotional together.
Welcome back, 5:40. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, today is the 4th anniversary of Sir Keir Starmer becoming the leader of the Labour Party in what could be a significant general election year for the party, because all polls seem to now show him becoming the next Prime Minister. But does Sir Keir have what it takes? Well, now I'm joined by the political commentator, Peter Spencer. Welcome to the show, Peter. Always a pleasure. Sir Keir Starmer, the man in waiting. Does he have the X factor, or does it even matter? I mean, because the Tories seem to be so hiding for a beating. Will Starmer win just by simply not even doing anything?
I think that's probably quite a good policy, actually. I mean, the fact is that Starmer, well, let's face it, he is a bit boring, isn't he? But then, and you say safe is boring, but on the other hand, boring is safe. Now, Rishi Sunak tried to sort of play the boring card when he first got in, but he was sitting astride a party which was so utterly riven with splits that it calls to mind a line from Macbeth, that it's like two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art. And any attempt he ever made to sort of try to govern sensibly was completely rubbed off the headlines by the fact that the Tories were busy biting bits off one another. Now, Starmer has a party which is, albeit, it's not perfect. There are disagreements over the Israeli-Palestinian thing, for example, but compared to the Tories, it has an absolutely clean bill of health. Now, as to what he's liable to do when he gets into office, he's very wisely keeping his cards close to his chest. If he were to give too much away, there's a danger that the Tories could at the last minute snatch his policies, and then, like, for example, when he was talking about sort of the non-dom tax thing, then all of a sudden the Tories said, that's a good idea, we'll have a bit of that. And so he's I mean, up until now, he's sort of got away with just banging on about how rubbish the Tories are. The time will come when he's going to have to sort of show his hand. But who knows what he has up his sleeve? I mean, look, you've got the London mayor, for example, touting the idea of legalizing marijuana. I mean, so instead of putting additional strain on our legal system, law and order stuff, you could actually bring in billions in tax revenue. Hey, that'd be great, man, a great gas. I mean, I don't actually quite see Starmer doing that, but who knows what else he might have up his sleeve.
Peter, do you think, you've been in politics a long time, we've gone from an 80-seat majority just 4 years ago, and if today's poll is to be believed, a 154-seat majority for the Labour Party. Astonishing numbers. Do you think we'll look back on this in the future as a time of unparalleled bedlam?
Yes, I do. I mean, it calls to mind a line from Jim Callaghan. You talk about me being around since forever, sort of around the time that Noah was planting the trees to build his ark. But Jim Callaghan, when he could see the spectre of Margaret Thatcher looming over him, he said, look, there are times in politics when there is a sea change. At that point, the public has made up its mind what it approves of and what it wants. And at that point, anything you say or do will make any difference. I think that that's where we're at now, and I think that the Tories collectively recognise that, and they're having a bit of a collective Private Fraser moment. We're doomed.
I think you're right. And, you know, Peter, we've been asking GB News viewers today if they have any faith in Rishi Sunak when he says that we will leave the European Court of Human Rights. And even amongst GB News viewers, I mean, there's a very, very small amount of people that have any faith. Is that the point now? We are just ready for change. The country feels tired.
Yes, absolutely right. Yeah, the Tories have been in power for 14 years, and we have sort of living standards are lackluster. Likewise, economic expansion, and our public services are manifestly creaking. In many cases, they're actually getting very, very much worse. And I mean, you look at, for example, faith in the NHS, which is something which affects all of us, unlike, if you like, illegal migration, which affects some people. The NHS is something that we're all involved in, and surveys suggest that actually faith in the NHS is at an all-time low. Little surprise there, with hundreds of people dying apparently every week because of delays in A&E. And so what we're looking at is a nation which I think it has a sense that it's actually crumbling and things can only get better. They certainly can't get a lot worse.
OK, Peter Spencer, thanks for joining us. But it does beg the question, if things don't get much better when Sir Keir Starmer gets the key to number 10, who will they blame then? Thank you very much for joining us. Peter Spencer, always an absolute pleasure. Now, coming up, has football become too PC, or the terraces a woke joke? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again and welcome to the GB News forecast with the Met Office. Further rain arrives overnight. It's going to stay cold in the north, and as the rain moves into Scotland, there will be some disruptive snow over the hills north of the Central Belt. A number of systems coming our way over the next few days. The next low brings spells of rain and hill snow across the UK, and then another low for the weekend. Storm Kathleen, named by Met Erin because the strongest winds will be for the Republic of Ireland. But it will be blustery overnight, nevertheless, with some heavy rain in places. Those spells of rain particularly affecting northern and western parts of the country, although the far north of Scotland staying clear of that, with a touch of frost in places. But it's across central Scotland where there's the risk of disruption as we start off Friday. Rain disruption for lower parts of the Central Belt, and for higher parts of the Central Belt and into central Scotland, the risk of some disruptive snow, up to 10 centimetres or so above 300 metres. Could cause some issues first thing. That peters out through the day and it stays cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's a mild day. Early rain clears to showers, some sunny spells in between the downpours, with highs of 18 or even 19 Celsius towards the southeast. Another blustery day on Saturday. In fact, it becomes increasingly windy as heavy rain moves north across Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing, replaced by showers. Some sunshine in between the showers. The wind will be strong with gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour for Western Britain and Northern Ireland, but it will also be a warm wind, highs of 20 or 21 Celsius.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 5:48, the final furlong we're on now. And Brits are eating 50% more calories from takeaways now than before COVID, which has come at the expense of pubs, restaurants and takeaways. And adults also consumed up to 74% more calories from the likes of Deliveroo and Just Eat, while the proportion from other hospitality venues fell off. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the chairman of the National Obesity Forum, Tam Fry. Tam, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Lockdown changed a lot of how we lived our lives, and lots of the circumstances, the knock-on effects were obvious on education, on cancer, on heart attacks. But this one, it's perhaps not so obvious, although perhaps it is. We got used to being super serviced as couch potatoes, and it's a habit that stuck. We've become dependent, it seems, Tam, on food simply being delivered, which is making us gorge more and become more fat.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. We're eating far too much, and it's not healthy, and it's going to go on for a long time, I think.
What do you think we can do about that, or can't we? Is this just another example of how we turn to apps?
Yeah, if the government would actually put in some of the measures that it has promised us, it would be a great help. I mean, everything's now been put off until 2025, and that is what the health minister says. And when it comes in 2025, that will be the exclusion of bog-offs, and it'll be exclusion of advertising on television for unhealthy food. But I hope very much that it will actually contain more powers for local authorities to shut down the takeaways, because it's the profusion of takeaways and the competition between them which is lowering the price, which makes the whole thing so attractive for people who are short of cash.
Do you think the answer, though, Tam, is more legislation, more clampdowns, more taxation? What about some personal agency? What about people just took responsibility for what they put in their cake holes?
Well, without wishing to be rude to you, that's been on for 25 years. Back in the late days of the Major government and the beginning of the Blair government, the whole emphasis was on personal responsibility. If you would only eat more sensibly and exercise, all this would be cleared up. It took about 10 years to rubbish that. And in 2007, a document came out which told the government precisely that personal responsibility was not the answer, that in fact the answer was sensible legislation. I don't mean punitive legislation, but sensible legislation. And we saw the first sign of this in 2016, when George Osborne, in his budget speech, said, I'm going to put a levy on sugar, the companies that produce fizzy drinks. And I'm going to levy them a lot of money if they don't take out the sugar, and I'm going to levy them less money if they progressively take down the sugar. And everybody felt that that was going to be too much, and that the companies would not subscribe to that. But they did en masse. And when the levy came in 2018, only about 2 or 3 sugary drinks were at their previous levels. Everything else had come down, and the companies were able to offer their customers less sugar in their colas, and even down to water. Coca-Cola, which was always regarded as the baddie in this instance, actually bottled more water during that period of time than they did the traditional Coke. So levies is what is really necessary, and that's the kind of thing which I hope will come in. It's been advocated since 1918 by a lot of people, including the former chief medical officer for the country. And she said at the top of a long paper which she wrote for Boris Johnson, let us contact now with the amount of sugar which is going into our milkshakes, into our high street coffees. And by the way, we can also take the sugar out of sugary cereals, which are pre-sugared, but only they get more sugar added to them at the breakfast table. And that is
but Tam, all of this is just nanny state stuff, isn't it? And the sugar tax hasn't worked. We still have spiralling obesity. You can't put bans or taxes across everything, can you?
No, you can't. And I'm not suggesting taxes. Taxes is your word. Levies is what is required, because what happens with levies?
What's the difference? What's the difference between a tax and a levy?
No, there's a huge difference. The tax is on the direct consumer, and that would be wrong because, in fact, consumers don't like taxes. But levies are placed on industry, and they're there in order to tempt industry, or certainly give them a carrot, to lower the bad ingredients of their food products and their drink products so that they're healthier. And that benefits industry. They made a lot of money out of the sugar levy, and the customers liked it because they switched from the very heavily sugar-laden drinks to better drinks, which were low sugar or water.
OK. Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. That's superb stuff. Thank you, Tam Fry, Chairman of the National Obesity Forum. Thanks for joining us on the show. What do you make of that? I just think people should just maybe put less in their cake holes and stop relying on the nanny state to do everything for them. We've had loads of emails today. Let's have a quick one on the topic of Wrexham banning a fan for 3 years. I'm considering reporting Scotland football fans to the Scottish hate crime police, says Paul, for booing our national anthem at the game the other day. Great stuff. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Now it's time for your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the GB News forecast with the Met Office. Further rain arrives overnight. It's going to stay cold in the north, and as the rain moves into Scotland, there will be some disruptive snow over the hills north of the Central Belt. A number of systems coming our way over the next few days. The next low brings spells of rain and hill snow across the UK, and then another low for the weekend. Storm Kathleen, named by Met Erin because the strongest winds will be for the Republic of Ireland. But it will be blustery overnight, nevertheless, with some heavy rain in places. Those spells of rain particularly affecting northern and western parts of the country, although the far north of Scotland staying clear of that, with a touch of frost in places. But it's across central Scotland where there's the risk of disruption as we start off Friday. Rain disruption for lower parts of the Central Belt, and for higher parts of the Central Belt and into central Scotland, the risk of some disruptive snow up to 10 centimetres or so above 300 metres could cause some issues first thing. That peters out through the day and it stays cold in northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's a mild day. Early rain clears to showers, some sunny spells in between the downpours, with highs of 18 or even 19 Celsius towards the southeast. Another blustery day on Saturday. In fact, it becomes increasingly windy as heavy rain moves north across Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing, replaced by showers. Some sunshine in between the showers. The wind will be strong with gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour for Western Britain and Northern Ireland, but it will also be a warm wind, highs of 20 or 21 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King. In Hampshire, the eastbound M27, there's a lane close on the entry slip road at junction 5 at Southampton Airport. Long delays following a breakdown. Also in Hampshire, southbound on the M3, there's a lane close and delays after an accident just around junction 5 at Hook. In Hertfordshire, the clockwise M25, long delays after an earlier accident just before junction 22 at St Albans. Delays though still going back towards junction 19 at Watford. In Bedfordshire, and the northbound M1, long delays. There's a lane closed due to emergency repairs just between junction 11A at Dunstable and 12 at Flitwick. Delay, so going back towards junction 8 at Hemel Hempstead, and the northbound M6 in Cheshire looking busy after an earlier breakdown around junction 20 at the M56.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every